All right, I'm ready when you're ready.
Ready? Okay. We'll call the session of the council back in order. Michael, are you ready?
We were going to go around
That's fine. Michelle?
like that.
He likes to do bad news first. That's what he likes to do. Okay, so I think most people probably know that the DOC has had some funding cuts this year. I think when I was here previously, I had mentioned that they were looking at handing out $11 million less than they did in the previous year, and their explanation for that has been vague. We'll put it that way. So they have moved some money to administrative costs. They had moved $2 million to CTP, which is a program we participate in. You are offered, people who qualify under the state law can come out on community corrections to finish the last portion, depending on their level of offense, in the community. We do take part in that, but obviously our participation in that is dependent upon the home address of the folks that qualify for the program. So we don't have a lot of control over what we're offered as far as that goes. And then the remainder of the money, the explanation they gave was that it has to be used to backfill the last 6 months of grants that were handed out in 2026. So make sense of that if you can. I cannot. So the bottom line is they were handing out $11 million less, and when they sent those cuts out, there were some discussions had about looking at performance measures and looking at actual numbers diverted from the DOC, which is the entire purpose of the programs and the grants, is to keep populations of DOC down. And when they handed out, we do get a spreadsheet that shows every county, or every program, I shouldn't say every county, every program and what that program received and how that happened. And in looking at that, we kind of were looking for a pattern, or what criteria did they use to make those decisions, and the pattern is not what was stated it would be. It was not based on the diversions or the performance measures so much as an old funding formula that appears that they dusted off and brought out, which I'm told, I was not old enough to know, but I'm told by people who have been around community corrections a lot longer than me, that funding formula is originally from the early 80s, and it hasn't been changed since. So what that funding formula does not take into account is, specifically what we're interested in, is it doesn't take into account if you're running a residential work facility program. So you're a county in another part of the state, similar population to us, similar criminal population to us, could be in the funding formula set to receive the same amount of funding that we're set to receive, because it doesn't take those things into account. What we did find when we looked for patterns in that funding decisions when they were finally released was if there was a pattern, and the only one that we could really identify was that the residential counties took the biggest hit, and we believe that's because they aren't represented in the funding formula. So for us, what that means specifically is that our grant funding was cut by 35%. That'd be about 14% of the overall budget for community corrections. And so since we've had that information given to us, we have been working at completely redoing it. So whatever I submitted to you all back in April or May, don't look at it.
Throw it out the window.
It's out the window. We've been redoing, we've been coming up with new plans, new ideas, all kinds of things. So the first thing that I did, obviously, was sit down and look at the budget and say, what can we change? What can we do quickly? What kinds of things can we look at? Just look for savings. So obviously, a lot of that was just going down through the budget and looking for any little place that we could cut anything as far as supplies, services, and things like that. And then we already had in the works a plan to switch our GPS anklet provider because it is going to give us cost savings. And so that has already, that's already been approved, and we are working on that switchover day, which I believe is going to be early August. And so when we switch over, that'll be a cost savings for us as far as what we have to pay that vendor to have the devices and use them, so on and so forth. Obviously, when we submitted the budgets, you all asked for them to be submitted with no raises for employees. And so that was already kind of figured into my budget, so I didn't change that. So everything I'm talking about right now is representing no raises for employees. Last year, if you remember, the council did make the decision to help us get our employees kind of up to salary ordinance level and kind of help us, because we'd always been a little bit behind, like a year behind on where people needed to be. And so that was $144 and some $1,000 that was appropriated for that. We didn't use that entire amount because what we wanted to do is make sure we were giving those raises based on merit and years of experience and things like that. So last year, well, for 2026, we used under half of that amount. And so what I have done in the rework of the budget is try to use up to that full amount that was already appropriated for 2026. We can do that again in 27. That's something I've included in the budget to help us make up the deficit. And the next thought, obviously, is how do we raise some more revenue for our project income account? And so what we looked at there is, at our last advisory board meeting, we did have a discussion about the daily fee rate for our home detention participants. In looking at numbers that we were receiving from other counties throughout the state, realized we were a little bit on the low end of a daily rate that's usually charged for that. So I did graph that out for members of the advisory board, kind of showing where we fall versus the other information we collect. Some of those other counties also do a minimum amount or a percentage, or they do a minimum amount or 1 hour of that individual person's wage, just some different ways to figure it. And so instead of making a decision at the last advisory board, what members of the advisory board talked about was actually collecting a little more data on the hourly wages of our participants to see if one of those other forms would be a better way to do it going forward into the future. So we're collecting that data, and we're going to be presenting that at the September advisory board, where I believe some change in the daily fee charged to our home detention participants will happen. I'm just not sure what form it's going to take right now. And so that'll be a way for us to increase what's going into our project income account. The other thing that I've been up here, up to the commissioners about is our ability, starting July 1, to run our own commissary, which will allow us to spend money on travel, training, equipment, and things that can be used for rehabilitation programming. And so I know Susan has looked at that new statute. She's kind of talked with us about the best way to set up the actual accounts. It doesn't run in the same way that a sheriff's commissary runs. It will be done all through a claim system through the auditor's office. So it'll be run like our other accounts. In my limited experience of the accounts, Susan may not say that, but I say it'll run the same. So
Correct.
she can correct. So all of those things are really just to help us with project income. The way I've redone the budget, we are going to be appropriating, hopefully not spending, at least not too far over, but we're going to have to be appropriating about $200,000 over what we actually took in 2025 as revenue into that project income account. So all these things, raising the fees and the commissary account and all these things I'm talking about are just trying to fill in that gap to get us back to more of a balanced budget where we're not overspending. We do have some money in that account, so I think we can probably do that. Right now it feels a little bit like we're in survival mode to see what's going to happen with these grants moving forward. And so our hope is obviously to only have to do that for a year or so until we have a new solution. And I think we're able to sustain that. Past a few years, it's not sustainable, so we'd have to figure something else out. All of that being said, what that leaves me with at the end is taking what was a $375,000 change down to about $120,000 change. And that is the portion where when I stopped with the budget, I thought, what else can we possibly do? So my ask today from you all, from the council, is going to be that we talk about taking over, obviously from whatever portion of budget or area that's possible to do, but having the county take over the building expenses for the community corrections building. Obviously, the building itself is a county building, and it needs maintained, and it needs the bills, the electricity, the water, the insurance, all of these things paid. We also have a number of contracts. Because it's newer building, there's an HVAC contract that has to be paid every 3 years. We have contracts for other heating and cooling inspections and generator and all these different things. And I do have a handout for that to give you guys, just to give you an idea of the different amounts we're talking about. So I'll just pass these if that's all right. And when I put all these different things together, it does get us right about at 120,000. So with that change, that would get us, I think, through 2027. What I want to point out is there are some more long-term things that are going on statewide. Obviously, we have had a lot of conversations with whoever we thought we could, local representatives and people that we thought might be able to help us get some answers about what happened or decide if there's a change that we might go through. The other thing is the State Community Corrections Association has decided that they think it's in everyone's best interest for the DOC to no longer be necessarily the one that's in charge of these grant dollars and making the decisions of how to hand them out. And so their push at this point is going to be for the grants to move over to the Criminal Justice Institute, which is a body that has a board of different people. Some of them are in certain positions, certain state positions, and others are appointed. And that is a body that already gives out a lot of grant funding. They also do some training. They also do little bits of research, or at least hand out research to people in the criminal justice system, keep us all up to date. So the thought process for them being that if it was given to a body that already has a lot of experience doing grants, that it might be a little more stable of a process, and it might be a little more on fixed criteria that we can all look towards. And along with that move, what they want to do is change that old funding formula that I was talking about earlier. So they want to update that formula. They want to have some say over what goes into that formula. They want to have residential programs kind of taken into consideration, and other things like that. So as far as I know, there's not a draft of the funding formula at this point, but that's part of the process that they're looking at going through. There has been a lot of commentary and discussions at the state level about this, because obviously it isn't only our county. There are other counties that have lost all funding for problem-solving court programs. There are counties that have lost funding for probation. We actually were receiving a grant for probation from this pot. Our priority letter this year had asked that if a choice had to be made, please give our funding to community corrections and not to the probation portion. So that is what happened for our award. But there are other counties where my understanding is that that wasn't, what happened to them was not necessarily what they asked for in their priority letter. So there are judges and many other people throughout the state who are asking a lot of questions about, if my problem-solving court got cut and I have 40 people in my problem-solving court, what happens to those people now? How do I keep running a program with no money to run a program, to pay my staff, things like that? So I think it is a much wider issue than just us, but specifically today, I know we're focusing on what does it mean for us locally. That is, I think, kind of what I had so far. The other thing that I would add is we are looking locally at some other kind of long-term options. So, for example, we know that, so right now in the residential facility, we have 25 participants. We might have 26 tomorrow. It fluctuates day to day. So what we're looking at is obviously, we know we have the setup. We know we have the facility already. It's purpose-built, and it works for our purpose, which is community supervision. And one of the things that I have the opportunity to talk to people in the parole division about is if they could partner with us to use it as kind of an intermediate sanction, which is something that often happens in the criminal justice system. And if so, that would allow us to gain more revenue from some of their participants using beds that aren't necessarily getting used right now. So just another way to raise revenue. Just had a meeting earlier this week about that with them, kind of talking about the details, how would it work, who makes the final decision. We have final say. If you want to send us someone, we don't want that person, we're not taking that person. That's how an agreement would work. And so far, everyone's kind of in agreement of how it would work. We just need to iron out details and then, take it in for approval and see if that's a good idea. But those are kind of, for us, more long-term local plans of what we think we can do to make everything run feasibly. One of the things that I know we always like to talk about, and I think it did come up earlier this morning, is kind of how community corrections affects the jail and the jail population, which is always important, and we all like to talk about it. But one of the things that I wanted to bring that I think sometimes we don't always talk about is our program isn't the same as a jail. Obviously, it serves a purpose of helping to keep people out of the jail, but there's a lot of value added because of what we're doing with our interventions and our case management and trying to help people change thought patterns, trying to help them work on addiction issues, try to help them work on anger issues and all that different stuff. I came up here and I kind of passed out my pamphlet. Was that last month? I think it was last month. And that was kind of the purpose of that too. But one of the things I wanted to bring with me today was we do exit surveys and we have people kind of write down, what did you get out of the program? What did you like? What did you not like? All these different things. And surprisingly enough, we do get some complaints. Obviously that happens. And sometimes the complaints actually are helpful because there are things that we can look at and say like, oh, you know what, maybe they had a point there, maybe there's something we can change. But for the most part, the comments we get are pretty positive, which I don't think a lot of people would expect that to be the case. So I just brought some of them and highlighted some real quick off of our last 6-month roundup that we did, because I wanted to just kind of point out what we're actually doing at community corrections is more than just housing people or just watching where they are in a map. There's a lot of work that's going in by our case management staff. So for example, this first one reads, I really enjoyed my trauma book that I worked on with my probation officer. I learned a lot about PTSD and trauma and how to understand and how to manage it. This one says, I understand my addictions better and how to control them. LOL. Not sure what that was for, but that's what it says. Thank you for allowing me to complete my sentence in this program. It says, this helped with changes that affected me very negatively that I would never even give effort to trying for myself. Thank you for getting me on the right track. This one says, I want to say thank you. I appreciate all of you guys here and what you've done for me. This facility just needs to keep doing what it's doing. It's helped me a lot. I believe that my probation officer was tough on me when I needed it. I appreciate she gave me the opportunity to prove myself. I truly feel like I've grown a lot from my time with her as a probation officer. And I have more, but I won't read them all. But I just wanted to kind of give a sampling of, obviously we're there to serve a purpose and they're not specifically happy to be with us. I don't know that anybody would be. But I think there's a lot that can be gained by what we do, and I just wanted to make sure that I point out all the efforts of our staff that are more than just housing people or just keeping track of them day to day. So, any specific questions?
Michelle, how many beds do you have out there?
52.
And we did talk about it when the judges were here today, and the fact that, our jail has the maximum number of people that are there should be 80. We've not been able to hit that 80 except for a couple of times during this year. And then for just a matter of, I think, days, not even weeks. But your program has kept people out of the jail, and that's a very important thing. I agree with you. I think that the county should just, if we're going to take some of the expenses from the program, taking those expenses from the building and the grounds is probably, that should be our expenses to deal with. Now, whether or not I agree with all these that you've listed here, that's something else altogether, but I think that would be the appropriate way to do. And I know that we did increase the amount of money that you had for your staff because those staff that are not considered probation officers could never reach our level that we said was the minimum level for the employees. We did give you that money, and I think that should continue. But, you know, unfortunately, we can't do a whole lot about the probation salaries because that's established by a state schedule. But hopefully we can continue to maintain your other staff. Because if I remember right from when we did this initially, the probation officers that you do have out there 24/7 can help us eliminate or not need overtime for other officers in the regular probation department, because they can do drug screens and things like that during the off hours. Is that still true?
Our residential officers, yep. The residential officers, they generally help with probation screening on weekends, so that nobody from probation has to figure out a schedule to come in on a weekend and do those screens. The other thing that we've been working on, and I think Lapham might talk about this a little bit when he gets up here, is we have been able to create a juvenile detention program that could be used nights and weekends. So if the juvenile has some kind of issue where the probation department feels like they may need some additional restriction but not necessarily sent somewhere that requires a bed, we have set up a process and some training for our staff at Community Corrections to be able to put them on a GPS anklet and send them home, circle around their home so we know if they attempt to leave, until they can get into court and decide, the judge can decide what he wants to do further with that particular case. That is something. Another thing I remembered while you were talking was, I haven't really talked about pretrial. I believe we talked about it last year, but part of the funding cuts last year for most of the state were the pretrial programs. Those were some of the programs that got zeroed out. Ours did not, because our pretrial officers are kind of written into the main part of our community supervision grant, because they do more than strictly what some pretrial services offices do. They also do eligibility screenings for us. They also do alcohol monitoring, and both of them also sit on one of the problem-solving court teams. So they do more than just strictly pretrial, but their largest part of their responsibilities is to do morning pretrial reports for the courts, kind of letting the court in on as much information as they're able to collect that can help make bond decisions. And then they also do supervision of pretrial defendants so that they have some restrictions and the courts can feel a little more comfortable about making a decision to release somebody, knowing that they're going to be checking in with us, possibly on home detention, possibly on alcohol monitoring, possibly asked to go do some treatment and things like that. We are still waiting on an answer from the Office of Court Services on a separate grant that we wrote, asking for some pretrial funding in order to help with what we knew was going to be a shortfall with the $11 million reduction. We haven't received an answer on those yet. We have been told by staff members at Court Services that they are kind of scrambling to help any of the programs who took a big cut from Department of Corrections. So I'm not sure when. We think the answer is supposed to come this week, but nothing's guaranteed on that. So that's something we're waiting for as well. But I know the pretrial program is also especially important when we think about jail numbers, because in general, our pretrial officers are supervising about 70 people on pretrial release at a time. I would never presume to say how many of those people would have remained in jail, because that is a decision for the judges and not for myself. But even if you assumed only a portion of those people remained in jail, you can just think about how much higher those numbers would be day to day. They did, I have the annual report, and I want to say it was over. It's hard to count the people because they're on for different spaces of time throughout the year. So it's hard to say. What I can say is we're generating around 70 per day. And what I can say is last year, they supervised people for over 27,000 days, person days, if that makes sense. We call them person days. So if you imagine even a portion of those ended up remaining in the jail, then you get an idea of, I mean, that would be a number of people per day that would end up staying. So this plan that I'm laying out here allows us, even if we don't receive the funding from the Office of Court Services, to keep the pretrial program running just as it is running now. And that's kind of been our idea with how we've redone the budget since we found out about our cut, is how can we make sure that we go through 2027 providing the same services in the same programs the same way that everyone has had it so far, so that we can see what happens in the future. The grant funding moves, if it gets increased again, if any of our work with lobbyists and state representatives pays off eventually, and then in 28, we're maybe looking at a different picture, if that makes sense.
Circling all the way back around, Michelle, the programs that you do operate, and we show their success. We have documentation that they are successful and recidivism is down, and that's because that's the bottom line. You know, most of us don't mind paying for a service or a program if it's successful. You
So-
have the documentation that it is successful.
Yeah, if you look at our, even at our annual report, we can see short-term, right? Because what we have is for electronic monitoring, I think last year we had 84% successful completion rate. So that means for the period of time that we had that person, they were able to maintain employment, stay free of alcohol and drugs, do the things we asked them to do, complete treatment, everything that would have been applied to them as a special condition by the court, and completed with us successfully, which is not an easy thing to do. If you've ever read through our rules, they are specific and extensive. So short-term, that shows. Long-term is a little more difficult because finding out true recidivism numbers takes a lot of time and a lot of work. You have to kind of go backwards in time and look at each individual person and look at what was their criminal pattern up until the day you took them into the program. And then you look at them after they left the program, and is that similar or is it not, right? So did we have absolutely, what we're going for is absolutely no new arrests, right? But what can even happen is we look at somebody who had multiple felonies and now they've left us and maybe they only had a driving while suspended misdemeanor. I call that success because we've taken them out of committing felonies, which are either hurting themselves or possibly creating victims and hurting other people. Those things take an awful lot of time to look at. The Department of Corrections collects some of that for us, but what they're collecting is only, do the folks that we served in our program return to the Department of Corrections within 2 years? Because they're using their intake numbers for that. And on those numbers, we also in DeKalb are successful. So I have those. Another thing the Department of Correction looks at for us is what population are we serving? We do everything by risk level. I know you guys have heard us talk about it. So we are focused on higher risk, high and medium on the scale we use most often. And in some data that they like to put out, DeKalb is always ranking highest in one of those because our whole system is pretty focused on being evidence-based and data-driven, and we know who we're targeting, and everyone agrees on that. So those are the cases that we usually end up getting. All of those performance measures we are doing very well on. We're at least usually above the state standard and at least at state standard on all of those. So I think in all those ways, I would say that we're being successful in what we're trying to do. Yeah.
And I think that that shows, Michelle, I just wanted to reiterate that. We heard that from Mark Olivero this morning, just what your program is doing and what it has helped, and what it also, to keep in mind just for council, how much it's saving us by not having to house those inmates here or outside of the county, and the amount of money that that's saving us. It's a shame that you have to worry about that funding every year and it going away, but I think you guys do a really good job of trying to put the best numbers forward and presenting it to council, because it can't be easy for you, for Michael, or for Ryan. But it's a job well done, because like the public defender said this morning, it's helped save us money just by us keeping those numbers down. So y'all are doing a great job with that.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Michelle? Thank you, Michelle. Brian?
Thank you. I have 10 budgets that I manage. The first one I'm going to go over real quick is the alcohol and drug budget, which is Fund 2504. That one did increase a little over $11,000 this year. The reason for that is because we moved 12 probation officers from the probation users fee fund, receiving a $3,000 stipend there, and we were able to move that into the alcohol and drug program. The reason for that is because the fund was able to build the user fees up over the last couple of years, and we could shift that away from one fund to the other. The other one that increased $2,000 on it was for the travel and training, and that was in anticipation of loss of the grants or reduction in funds for grants for the treatment court. So that way the treatment court officers can still receive the additional training and so forth. Any questions regarding the alcohol and drug fund? I'm trying to keep mine brief, that way Michael has plenty of time, so. And then I'm looking at the Fund 2508. This is the user fee fund for the Veterans Treatment Court. Currently, we had, in 2025, we served 9 participants, 9 veterans. Of those, 431 drug tests were administered. Currently, we have 7 veterans that are participating, and we have 1 that graduates in 2 weeks. So in 2 weeks on a Thursday afternoon at 2:30, you're all welcome to attend our Veterans Treatment Court graduation. Overall for Vet Court so far, we started in March of 2018. We've had 26 graduates. We've had 98 referrals. We've had 5 terminations, and our graduation rate, I can't define success because everybody can define that differently. Our graduation rate for Veterans Treatment Court is 86% graduation rate since 2018. Any questions on that? The Veterans Court grant then, 9153, that is a grant that is funded from the Office of Court Services. That number on the requested budget for 2027, that is our dream list. We've never gotten our dream list, but you can always shoot for the moon. And I did receive information this morning that is just kind of piggybacking off of what Michelle had said regarding the grant funds that IOCS is trying to work on making up for lost funds from the DOC grant. More than likely, they won't be able to come up with all of it. And so they anticipate that at least our funding will remain consistent as what it has been in the last year or so. If it does decrease, they said it'll decrease slightly. And so last year for Veterans Treatment Court, it was $133,000, and that is, as I said, that is all for grant funding. Any questions about that? Moving on then to 9157, the Problem Solving Court. This is the Addictions Treatment Court. The Addictions Treatment Court has been in operation, will be 5 years on July 21st of this year. That program has, I believe we have 26 current participants. We do have a graduation coming up for that. That will have, I believe, 5 graduates. Apologize, I'm trying to find my notes for that one. Okay. Let's see here. We've had 38 participants in 2025. Of those, we'd had just over 2,200 drug screens were administered for those participants. Currently, we have 26 active, 5 graduating in August. And then so far we've received 30 referrals in 2026, and 11 participants have signed in. Overall, we've received 269 referrals, and we've received 34. We've had 34 graduates from that program, not including the upcoming 5. And that graduation rate is at 65%. Again, we're dealing with the high needs, high risk population. And the national average is at 60%. So anything above 60% is considered a success in the best practices standards. So we are excited about having the 65% graduation rate for the Addiction Treatment Court. Our retention rate is at 71% for that. And then also for that grant, we do receive 2 positions, and then 20% of my salary is paid for that. And that one of those positions was originally paid for out of the county general for one of our officers, and the state was able to pick up that officer because we had to take away from the probation department. And at this time, we still have not even filled that vacant position, and has been vacant since 2024. And so the grant has been kind of covering those things. So I just wanted to kind of toss that one out there. Let's see here. It's all over the place. I do know that I think this morning I didn't even realize there was a council meeting this morning. I didn't even know what time, and I believe there was a question possibly regarding an additional appropriation that came up regarding an additional $12,000 into regarding drug screens. The reason for that is because we received another grant that I was not expecting. That was from the opioid settlement money from the city of Auburn. And so when I originally requested $10,000 in May of 2025, when my grant budget was sent out, I had no idea that, well, additional $12,000 was even going to be coming until I got an email in early May of 26. So then once that money was requested or received, then that's when that additional appropriation for that donation fund came up. Does that make sense on that? So I like being surprised with money. And so like so that's for the drug screens. We also, earlier this year, IOCS, Office of Court Services, gave us an additional $5,000 for addiction treatment court for drug screens. And I think $2,500 for drug screens for family restoration court, or $5,000. The numbers kind of get mixed in, but I've got them all written down. And so, but again, that's all for drug screens. And it's interesting when you stop and look at for drug screens, that is, besides salaries, that is our biggest expense for the treatment courts. You know, look, when you look at 2026 so far, addiction treatment court has had 965 tests, and we've been awarded $10,000 from IOCS from our original 2026 grant. That was all spent so far through May of 26. We haven't even paid June of 26's bill. And then in our donation fund for drug-free, they gave us $2,300. That money's already gone. And then we had received $2,500 from carryover funds from Office of Court Services. We have $2,200 left there. And then we have the $12,000 that was just, hopefully I haven't received if it was appropriated or not for that from the opioid settlement money today. And so, and the same thing for Family Restoration Court in so far through 26 and through May, we had 322 drug screens. And then in Veterans Treatment Court, we had 211 drug screens collected so far this year. For our drug screen cost for the 3 treatment courts from January through May of 26 was just under $21,000. It was $20,991. This is what we spent on drug testing for those 3 treatment courts. And so that money is being paid through by grants. And then when on a couple of the grants, they would only pay for clean tests, so probation has had to pick up a couple $100 here and there, maybe $500 max. And so, but again, that is coming out of user fees, nothing's coming out of county general on that. Any questions regarding the treatment courts, the alcohol and drug program?
Ryan, the treatment courts are in all 3 courts?
They're in 2. Yes, Veterans Treatment Court and Family Restoration Court is in Circuit Court, and then the Addiction Treatment Court is in Superior 1 with Judge Swope.
And participate in those programs, the person that's being monitored does not reimburse for the drug screens. That's us up front?
So far, they have not had to, because grant money has been able to cover them, at least for the clean drug screens. For Veterans Court and Addiction Treatment Court, they would only pay, the grants would only cover the clean drug screens. Family Restoration Court, because there is no user fee fund for no user fees, because we partner with the Department of Child Services, all of those drug screens, whether they are positive or negative, the grants have paid for and the participant doesn't pay for. And so when we run out of funding on our side for the urine drug screens, then the Department of Child Services in the past has helped us and would start collecting your oral fluid tests on the state's cost of that.
All right, so generally, if it comes back as a clean drug screen, we cover it.
So far, as long as there's funding.
That they test positive or something, that person would
Correct.
have to be responsible for it?
Correct.
Another incentive to
Exactly.
stay clean.
Exactly right. And participants have been surprised by that. And then with the additional opioid funding, we just received that $12,000 for addictions treatment court. That should help cover another 3 months of drug screens that would be paid for participants. So.
Anybody else any questions or comments?
Thank you.
Ryan.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Deep breath. A lot to cover. Michelle was slightly off in the description of how long we've been working on this for 6 months. If you don't count that, I'd say a year and a half. Or talking about community corrections and what's been done since the day she got hired. She uses certain terms. I'll use the term frugal. Michelle has been finding ways to save money since the day she walked in. And so when you talk about what we have left here today, it's the bare bones of what's left. I mean, there were a period of time when I've made the joke when talking to our council rep that I walked in one day and she was checking the price of Band-Aids to find a better price and what we could do. Okay, so I want you to know that even in her description, the amount of work that's been put in to guarantee that we are putting, what we are putting in is truly what's necessary. It's been, we had an idea what was coming because of last year. Now, I'm going to be a little bit more harsh on the decisions that are being made down south, okay? I'm going to tell you that they've developed the acumen for moving and acting and speaking with authority, but without the breadth of knowledge necessary to make the decisions that they've made, which is a difficult thing for us to watch. From that decision, we've talked to our state reps, other people, authorities, judges, professional associations. I've gathered the fact that they came in, they looked at it, and said what their intention was to do was a business acumen for public service. They want to cut 10%, see who can survive, and if you weren't good enough to survive a 10% cut, then you're probably doing some things wrong. I completely understand that. From a taxpayer's perspective, I could look at anybody and say that there's probably some bloat there. We should find out who's doing the right thing, get in there and take a look at their books and make sure they're putting money where it belongs. There's only one problem. They had a stated goal, and that was to reduce the number of people in IDOC. And because they didn't put enough barriers, enough watchdogs in there, they gave a 10% cut to a group who then cut it by 11 million, which wasn't really authorized. Nobody can determine where that went, and then ultimately turned the 10% cut into 35 for some people. I was then told that that wasn't the intention. Okay. So between that decision and now, what myself, Michelle, and everybody else that's been involved know is that judges, professional organizations, our state reps are all going down there to look at them and say, do you understand what the end of this will look like? Because the stated goal to reduce those numbers and the decisions that you've made will not reach your stated goal. The numbers just don't match. What they have is 96 to 97% rate of capacity at the Indiana Department of Corrections, which means they have no room. The Indiana Sheriff's Association within 2 weeks looked at them and said, not only is that a problem, our local jails have 10% of their population just waiting to come to DOC, so the line's already formed. Then you look at it and say all the programs that hold people that have a possibility of going to the Indiana Department of Corrections, the treatment courts, our work release centers, they're now cutting the funding to those with an unknown intention of just making that line longer. And the problem is they don't have the beds. So, knowing what we know, they will have to adjust. There's no possible way that they can't. I've looked at every analogy I can come up with, and the only one that makes any sense to me is the I Love Lucy, where they're trying to figure out where to put the chocolate. And the problem is they just don't understand that that's what they've done. Without the regulations, fine, the 10% cut. We would have been able to make that in a minute. We would have been able to move some things around, change some of what we were doing. We were ready for that. We planned for that 6 months ago. But that's not what they did. They dusted off an old formula and started making cuts that were, for many of our even local partners, if you spend enough time reading the paper, they may find insurmountable. We saw program death for people who we don't even know what their, as you say, what is their success rate? They may have had amazing success rates, but it was just program death. No money. Good luck. Figure it out. There are people inside those programs, and they don't even have laws that adjust us and tell us what they're supposed to do. So I will tell you, I have a limited amount. I can't make any promises, but there's, in my heart of hearts, I know that there's no way that they can continue on the path that they have without making some form of adjustment. And all the information that I have, speaking to the people that we have contact with downstate, that they are making sure that they understand that these decisions have unintended consequences, right?
Michael, this is I believe the second year that the probation department employees are not getting a raise.
Sure.
From the state.
Yeah.
Because even though the county pays the salary of the probation officers,
sure,
the schedule for each of the individuals based on their education and length of service actually comes to us from the state that we have to follow.
Correct.
This is year number 2 for that.
Well, 2025 is when they zeroed, yeah.
Okay.
I have a full answer to that one. I would like a couple more things on community corrections, but I'll give you all of that.
Well,
I got all
no,
kinds
if
of
I'm
answers
jumping
for it.
ahead, you finish up,
All
and
right.
we'll come back to that.
What I want you to remember is what we've done here, the level of work that we've done here has a couple points that I think are super important for the people. We know, we're well aware that you have $1 and you got to decide where to put it. I completely understand that. I want to talk about the thought pattern of what we're talking about right now. We know that long-term planning, we have to shift that into survival. Because we know that some of our partners, our close people, they might need some help. We might be able to help them with what they're doing. We have the bed space, we have that. Plus, in my heart of hearts, I know that next year, some people won't make it with those difficult decisions. So as far as I'm concerned, there'll be less people competing for the same money. So if we continue to survive, I think it's the best thing for DeKalb County. Now you take that survival and also talk about the other things that makes community corrections in DeKalb County so important. We talked about bed space, and that's the jail. I want that decision and what you do with the jail to be local. If we get too far, we just saw in the paper Monroe County's been forced into a position of having to make that decision and whether they will end up in federal court. We also have watched Allen County go through that, and it's probably added $20 million overall. And they lost control of what they wanted to do, where they're going to put it, how many bed spaces. Somebody else has taken that control. If we continue to be healthy, that decision stays here. Now, I can't take full and total credit or community corrections for the bed space differentiation. When I walked in, the average is 140 in the jail. It's now closer to that 80, 90 range. It's not all just community corrections. There's a percentage, and if you look, if her total is 60, that's 30 plus on electronic monitored home detention, another 25 on that. That's pretty close to that number. But the truth is, when we came in and we took control of it, I say we, by me, and then them telling me what to do, we had to have everybody involved. And that's one of the other lucky things that you will get for DeKalb County. Mark Olivero, the prosecutor, first started with Claire, but now Neil, all of our judges, everybody sits down there, and we decided, we understood it, and we all said we're all going to focus. Now, we became a little bit more of the center of that wheel because it was our job to look at them and say, 8 principles of evidence-based effective practice is what is necessary, but we have to do it one way and one way only. That's everybody top down has to be involved. We have to make every single decision based on that, and that's what you're going to see. That's why pretrial is so important. That's why these screening boards are so important. The SIFT is important. I was reminded by one of the members of our local government who looked at me and said, Mike, you just got to remember, not everybody really cares how well criminals are treated. Those seem like choices. And I agree, right up until it touches your front door. That's true. And what we are doing is attempting to reduce that front door touch as much as humanly possible. So if we first look at that reduction and we keep the jail population here, then we say that what we're talking about is survival. Then number 3, you have to look at, yes, all of our audits, our assessments and everything else have come in, glowing numbers. And then there's a number that I can't fully explain and I've held on to for the last 5 years. I arrived in 2018. The average number of human beings that walked through the DeKalb County Probation Department was close to 1,000. We are now on a 5-year reduction to where we see 650 people walk through our department. Now that's recidivism reduction and a number, but that's all the way across the board. That's not just my word. That's judges, prosecutors, probation, and as well as the community corrections and the things they are doing. Now, there's a lot of information that goes along with that. Evidence-based practices, as I said, the state is doing it without the depth. I can't give you all of it, but I can look at you and say that there's a lot of things. There is no one solution that fits all. Our jail is important, yes. Our prison's important, yes. But dosage, if every single one of you had an infection and your doctor walked in and he gave you all the same pill at all the same dosage, it wouldn't work because some of you were sicker than others, some of you had different infections. So we spend a lot of time with diagnosis. What do we need to do? What level works? And what's the least restrictive? Knock on wood, and there's probably not enough in here to look at you and say we haven't any of those really horrible instances because the SIFT is being done well. We have a great department. great a number of people involved. After those advisory boards, we have a pretrial board that has all those judges, the prosecutors, and public defenders talking about who are we letting go, who are we not letting go, who stays in the jail, who get let go. Those community safety issues, always number one, but it's still being done well. Hard for me to look at you until I've worked in 3 counties, and this is the best one I've ever worked with. Our team's amazing, and it doesn't forget that the commissioners, the council, and all the rest of the people who've had to listen to us drove on for hours of what this stuff really means. That's what's necessary. So that's what I want you to think about. Those are all the reasons that I think keeping this program healthy is truly necessary. She also talked to you about what we felt. We've talked about it a couple of times, and what's the real best way to look at you and say if we can make up for that money. The building is the county's building, regardless of what happens 5, 10, 15 years down in the future. I would imagine that you would want to make sure that you take care of your investment. You put the money into it, or whoever voted for that put the money into it. We think that's the best use of your county funds, is to guarantee that it stays effective, useful in whatever it ends up becoming. Hopefully remains as community corrections and part of a new jail when you get so that's the first thing. She talked about value. I have a whole set of handouts. I don't want to waste your time, but that is the other thing. We wanted to make sure that you understand that when you pay for it, it's not just the same. Those things are not equated. A jail bed versus an extensive amount of therapeutic intervention. Not that I have anything against those jail beds. I said they're necessary. It just happens to be that when you pay for this one, they pay for themselves. They get a job. They pay for their medical. They do all that, plus they're expected to be involved in the intervention. I wanted to talk to you about some major changes in the budget. One of the things that when you start throwing out numbers can be confusing. A&D is, as Ryan said, we pay our officers $1,000 over their base salary or the minimum salary rate intentionally because they're required to go through further testing, do more work by doing these evaluations, which gives us more control to make sure that we help the people in the way that we want to. Those are fees that we collect. So we're using the fees that we collect to provide that stipend. Those aren't things that come out of the general budget. It's the same with the probation user fees. We discussed the fact that drug testing is a significant amount of our budget, but that $70,000 that we spend maybe on average, it all comes out of probation user fees. Those probation user fees are the things we collect for our services, and then they roll over. So we provide the drug screen, they come back and pay us back, and then we use those funds, roll over, and that's the way it goes. There are a couple of significant things that I just wanted to touch on. As you can see, as Mr. Ring talked about, there were no changes in what they call the minimum salary schedule, which I'm going to get to, but I'm going to hit some other top points. One, I requested a stipend for one of my administrative assistants, not a full salary increase, but a stipend. She is English as a second language and has been doing interpreting within my office. And at the very beginning, she refused to take any money, but it has now become almost a weekly necessity to have her interpret for somebody else. Now, with that, I've also asked that to come out of probation user fees. I think that we collect those fees. Those are the things that actually help the people that walk in here. I would like to pay for that. I'm just letting you know that that's one of the additionals we have coming out of there. I've not asked County General to pay for that. The one big thing that I've asked out of County General, it would be a capital improvement, which is carpet for our department. Obviously, I've only been here since 2018, but I got an officer that's retired with 30 years, and when they moved into the building, she says it's the same carpet that was there back then. So our maintenance was good enough to find us a gentleman by the name of Alan Roth, who gave us an estimate of about 20.
I would always suggest that maybe you ought to talk to Chris Gallmer about, and the two of you figure out who's got the worst stuff.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm using duct tape to hold the seams down because I don't want people to fall down, but that's where we're at. And, to be honest with you, I've had an office under the stairs, so I'm not I never pay attention to that. But ultimately, the traffic areas are getting pretty rough. And so you look at that and say $26,000 is what they gave us, and that would be the tile style that they have in the basement. So if certain ones get worn out and roughed up, they can replace them individually instead of what we currently have, which is one giant piece with a billion seams in it that are all coming apart. And that's really where we're that. And I mean, when you think about it, I've told you, I mean, 1,000 people a year prior to myself, and then 700 a year in and out under that same section. It can be rough. So I've asked for that as well as a capital improvement, and would request that you find the ability to give us that increase. One of the other things, I wanted to give you some numbers. It's been important to us, and that was you guys gave us the ability to use Care of Inmates Fund, which is what we use for juvenile detention. And we had budgeted over the, originally it was at $25,000, and ultimately that's county expense, but they asked me to place it into my general budget so that we could have we could keep track. We could see exactly how much that we spent. A couple years ago, it got so exorbitant that we had to up that to about $35,000. Well, sometimes it'd be difficult to find beds inside the state, as well as they are doing the same thing. They've seen these necessities for their budget increase, so they've increased their prices. That's not the only reason we came up with our secondary program, which is an on-call ability to place juveniles in electronic monitored home detention. It was because there is a statute within the juvenile law that says you're supposed to you're required to find the least restrictive. And because we didn't have that option, I felt like we did have an extensive amount of young people that really didn't need to go south of Indianapolis to a detention facility I've never seen. I don't know who they hold. And we had options. I thought that there was a section in there that we had the ability to place inside their home, place them on full lockdown with an electronic monitor bracelet on their ankle until they had the ability to see a judge. Also felt that that was supposed to be within their. They should have that opportunity. If a judge looks at them face to face and still feels like detention is a necessity, they should do that. I bring that up not only because of that portion, because that's why we designed it, but the positive for the county is the savings. $35,000 last year we spent, with the appropriated budget is $35,000. Last year we spent $33,000. This year right now we spent a total of $6,000, $6,971, because we have used that program. Now, I don't want to look at you and say that that's a solid number, because truly what we are is reactive to the crimes that exist, to the things that happen. But when we had the ability to use that program, we have. And it's definitely been a godsend for us. I mean, even if you double it, we're saving. And there hasn't been many years when I haven't come in here on third quarter and had to ask for additionals. Well, I think we had made all those additionals before we bumped it up to $35,000. But we are doing everything we can, not only for the youth, saying that we don't want to put them in environments that we don't know, see, because everybody's doing that. You know, if they have their highest risk offenders, that's who's going to be there. And if we think we can find an alternative that both keeps the community safe and doesn't place them in an environment with that significant level of high-risk offenders, we want to do that too. And we have been able to do that. And the best thing is community corrections is on call 24 hours a day. Some officers had the ability to take them over there, put them on that bracelet immediately. I think law enforcement was in favor of that request. So we've also sent them out training information so they know how to do that. And it's been great. The last thing I have, and it does have to do with what Mr. Ring brought up, and it's the fact that since 2025, the state has not provided any raises in what's called the probation officer minimum salary schedule. That has made us non-competitive. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, the state continues to pour money into my competitors. They gave DCS workers, who are some of the competitors for our workers, a $10,000 base salary schedule, then reduced their expectations. They don't even have to have a college degree. They poured money into the state police, so we have guys who are leaving that stuff and choosing that instead. Corrections, because they needed people inside the prison. They control that, but then at the same time have not made those increases for us. I hate to use I think the best way to explain it to you is, since the 1980s, they decided it was a necessity. By 2004, they actually enacted the minimum salary schedule. We have found out now that some of the formality of how they actually get that passed is not in our best interest. And so that's why these zeros keep coming out. even though it appears that they have that money, or look at it and say that the economy is well enough that they can put it in other places. But the warning sign for this year is a starting officer will make less than my starting administrative assistant. And specifics are, my first year administrative assistant will make $43,826, and my first year officer on the salary schedule would be $42,311. And an officer requires a 4-year degree, a test, orientation, and then for our department, you got to take a second test, got to pass that. So extensive expectations on them, and that doesn't count all the other things that once you become an officer, what that means. I won't give you the entire speech, but once you become an officer, it changes where you shop, where you eat, how that works, and you also have things called judicial canons. I can't post things on Facebook about politics or any of the rest of that stuff, thank God. And so you have a lot of other rules you have to follow, so it's non-competitive. We've made a lot of noise about that, but ultimately it feels like screaming down a well. I don't want DeKalb to be in that position. The basic issue is it was passed and created as a minimum salary schedule. And so they spent 30 years telling all of us, well, me for the last 8, that our job was to come in here and look at you and say, they can't even be licensed unless you meet that minimum salary schedule. They've now changed that thought pattern, and they want me to walk in here, look at you and say, that whole thing we told you for 30 years, we need to change that. That's just the minimum. You can pay us above. And so they've kind of left that on all of these chiefs and these councils throughout the day. Even though there were WIS studies and all the rest of these things provided to the state to say we were non-competitive and they needed to take action, they have not done so. I'm requesting that you allow me to do that. We have a budget for administrative fees that we collect. It's just part of your standard fees that you pay to come into probation. An administrative fee, an initial fee, and then your standard probation. There's a statute that says that those fees go directly back to the county in excess of the minimum. The idea being, I just write a check back to you from those administrative fees to cover the wage increases that were passed for that year. 2 years that I haven't done that because we didn't get it. Only the standard ones who went up on state. And what I mean by that is each year that you get, if you're an officer for 2 years, you get a raise because they have a level and a years of experience. When you become a third-year officer, you just go up the level, but they're talking about the percentage. So the idea was I was expected to just write that check back to the county to help you offset that difficulty. That way it didn't, it's bad. We haven't done that because we didn't get it. We now have enough to cover what I would request, which would be a 3% raise across the board for our department at their base scale. Not any of the additionals that they get for any of the rest of that. The total for officers would only be about $26,220.27. If you do for officers at base scale as well as us three, it'd be $33,224.79. We have a total of $60,000 in the administrative fund. I'd be happy to write that back to the county to cover all of that so we can stay competitive and at least feel that we're making sure that they know that they're valued. I understand that what you would look at me and say is can you sustain it? I haven't done enough research to look at that, what we have in that, to say that I could sustain it, so I would request that you make it a stipend and allow us to continue to evaluate it for next year as well. And I would do the best I could to make sure that we were able to make that salary. And my hope is by then, by year 3, that the state would finally realize that we are falling drastically behind our competitors, and they would start to take some action on that. Any questions?
I just want to say, Michael, that you, Michelle, Ryan, and all of your professional staff have done an excellent job and continue to provide good services for our county, and I don't want to see that depleted or anything to take away from that. What I see the state doing in many cases is eliminating the professional development and professional certifications and degrees. They've already done that with child care services. They're now doing it with the daycare workers, eliminating the requirements for them. I don't want to see that happen. And the people need to understand, just as you've already said, number one, that the people that you're dealing with, most of us wouldn't want to and couldn't deal with them. And, you know, you do have to worry about or consider where you live and who you're shopping with and everything else. Things I don't have to worry about. That's a stressor on all of you. So I just want to compliment you on the job that all of you have done, all of your professional staff, and I want to see it kept at that professional level.
Well, I appreciate that. I said it before, but as far as I'm concerned, 8 years ago, I got lucky. You know, I guess
DeKalb County got lucky.
Yeah,
DeKalb County got lucky.
I got lucky. We got to walk in here, and I got the ability to speak plainly, direct, and look at people and say, yeah, there's a difficult job to be done, but when all of us are on the same team, man, you can get it done. And I've also been lucky with the two that we have here, all being on the same page. But yeah, I mean, some of the things and the decisions that they've made have made it more difficult, and I would agree with you. The professional expectations that will be held by the DeKalb County Judiciary, I don't think can be met. They have extensive expectations on our professionalism, our delivery, and what we are doing here to make sure that we are represented appropriately in DeKalb County. So yeah, I would agree with you. I don't want to do that. Now, we do hire slightly differently. You know, I recruit, I go out, I find people who I want on my team, and then I make sure that they know that this environment is where they want to be. But at the same time, I'm well aware that being able to pay your bills is where the rubber meets the road. You know, there's a lot of information on what my officers are facing with inflation and everything else. It's the first time in my career that I've ever had the number I have that have second jobs. I will tell you this, I think you guys know, I've moved to a 4-day schedule. We are not doing anything less than we have ever done for the county. We're still working 35 hours a week, but I have half of my department working Monday through Thursday, the other half Tuesday through Friday. We actually have more hours. We're getting more done. We're still completing the court coverage, but I need, a lot of them looked at me and you're like, man, I need that day. I need another day to take care of this, plus the additional of empathy fatigue. And when, as you state, this job can be difficult, and they need that extra day to kind of let it go. One of my judges said, never take less than 2 weeks of vacation. I can't get 3 days. Never take less than 2 weeks of vacation, because in the first week, your blood pressure doesn't even drop. So, yeah, and by the time you're thinking about that, you're already on your way back. So we are doing that. We're in our second week, no hiccups yet. Everybody seems to be enjoying it. It is a test for 6 months with our intention to switch at the 6 month mark and have the people who had Friday off have Monday off. But my intention is to look at them and say, I want you to be happy. I want you to be happy here. I want you to be able to take care of your families. It's a couple of changes in hours and what we're doing. But if that's what we have to do to keep the team that we have here, that's what we need to do. So, anything else? Thank you.
Thanks, Michael.
Have a good day.
And Michelle and Ryan. Thank you all. Dave, can we take 5?
Yeah, that's fine. Take 5. Now we will hear from the auditor.
All right. So I have 20 different budgets that I'm in charge of. Most of them you probably don't really want to hear about. Some of them are TIF funds that I have to budget for, all of our bonds, payments, DART, things like that. Some of our pass-through monies that come in, they don't, and none of them affect taxpayer money or county general. We do have a county elected officials training fund, and I know that some departments, generally, I am the one that budgets that for the departments that are allowed to use it, because not everybody can use it. Some departments had requested higher than the 2,000 that I've changed them all to, but we just simply can't do that because we don't have the funding for that. And prior years, that fund hadn't been used very much, so we had quite a healthy balance. But now the departments have been able to use it and are using it, so our balance is going down. So I've estimated the 2,000 for each department that is able to use that, and that is auditor, treasurer, recorder, sheriff, counsel, wait, maybe not sheriff, surveyor. I think that's all I can remember. So anyways, some had requested 4,000, but I had to adjust it down to the 2,000 for each of us. The other parts of our budgets have not really changed. The biggest part in county general is going to be the elected officials' pay. That is the council's ultimate decision. I have decreased it down to what some of the other elected officials are currently making. There's going to be over 13 years of experience and knowledge of all of our county finances that is going to be gone. The stipend is still in there. I do have notes that on the chief first deputy, everything's unknown because I don't know what's going to happen next year. But if the new elected official comes in and would keep Jody as a first deputy, then in my opinion, she should at least make what she's making right now. So I left that one a little higher. But again, all of that is your guys' decision. The only other thing, so then I also increased our overtime account because we, like others, I have a lot of employees that have no problem with putting in some extra hours when we need it, whether they're preparing to go on vacation and they want to get something ready to go, then we're able to do that. So I increased that a little bit, and the only other thing I increased was postage because postage went up, and I hadn't increased postage, I don't know if I ever increased it since I've actually been here. And actually, altogether, it's actually lower than what we had for. The auditor. Mm-hmm. The auditors is every year, yes.
You know, when we're talking about and it is two different items, actually. Number one, while I understand your thinking, I don't think it's right or necessary to lower the auditor's salary. I do say that it needs to remain exactly the same because you'll have a brand new auditor coming in next year that's going to have a good year or two to really get up to speed. So and we've done that in the past, where when a new person's coming in, we've not raised it. But that should also not affect the other elected officials. I mean, we should, and we can't do for the elected officials more and probably shouldn't do less than what we're going to do for the rest of the employees. We don't have any idea right now. We know the growth quotient is at 6%. I don't think anybody either here or anywhere else, wants to go for the full 6%. That's too much, too fast. You know, for the last 2 years, we've been frozen at 4%. We've stayed within that. But I don't think at this time we need to go any higher than that, of course. But we have absolutely no idea what we're talking about when we say give 2% across the board or 3% across the board or 4%. So I think we need those numbers before we can decide what the pay is going to be, is what the pay increases are going to be. Because we need to know how much we're talking when we say 2%. Is that something that we can afford? But as far as the elected officials in general, leave the auditor exactly where the auditor's at. All the stipends and everything are still there. And the elected officials would receive whatever we're going to give to the rest of the employees. Now, unfortunately, where it comes to Jody, the standard has been that the chief deputy makes 80% of the auditors, or of the elected officials' pay. That'll leave her at the same, but it stays within the rules, within the guidelines that we've established. Without, as you start changing things, then 2 years from now or 5 years from now, you got to figure out, well, why did we do something different that year that was outside of our rules? But I think the spread between there's been issues with the different elected officials wanting all to be paid exactly the same. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't think that's appropriate. I think that it's been shown, if you look at any of the other 91 counties in the state, the auditor is always at the highest paid, and the other elected officials are paid at something lower than that, but an appropriate for the job that they do. The auditor's office is the only office that touches not only every different department in this county, but also all of the different municipalities and townships and everything. They have something to do with every transaction that takes place. That's not the case with the other elected officials. So I think the different salary levels are appropriate. If you look at what the rest of the state is doing, they've already determined that's appropriate. Talk to any of the financial advisors that are advising the different counties. They would support that. So I think that what we need to do from this point is get the dollar amounts that would be given if we give a certain raise for our people. And then we can move forward from there, because that's going to be our biggest increase, I'm certain, of the next year's budget is going to be whatever those raises are going to be, because everybody has done an excellent job of keeping their foot on the brake and keeping it down. So that's just my opinion.
That'll be duly considered when we get to full council here then.
Yeah, that we can't vote on that today, of course, with Bob and Bill both being gone. That's not right. But up till now, we've not had any discussion at all about what are we looking at as far as raises. And that's really what everybody's sitting around here waiting on, is finding out what's going to happen with our wages in the coming year. And I want to make sure that, and I know that giving if people went through the wellness, they don't pay as much of the premium on their health insurance as they would if they didn't do that. But I do want to make sure that whatever raise we give, at minimum, covers whatever the increase in their health insurance is. I don't think they should be penalized for that. So, and I don't know how long it'll take. I'm just asking Jody and Susan how long it would take to figure out if we gave a 2% raise across the board. How long will it take to figure that out? Same way with 3 and 4%, so that we have something to compare it to.
It won't take super long. There's some departments that still entered increased wages, even though we asked them not to. So we gotta figure out which ones did, which ones didn't. Readjust some things and then we can figure it out. I mean, we would definitely know by your next meeting you have. I mean,
Okay. Well, and we've got, we won't do the actual cutting until September meeting. So we do have one more meeting that could go, that we can at least have time to consider it.
In the past, I think for elected officials, we have never lowered a new incoming person's salary,
Right.
correct?
Right, I'm not saying we don't.
That's what I think
That's why
you
I'm
were
saying,
saying.
we cannot lower that, that's not right.
That's what I thought you were saying, was
But
that
we
we've
can't-
always kept it, because I remember I was sitting here as a newly elected official one year, and they were passing the budget, and I was gonna be the recipient of an increased budget, and I don't, I'm coming in as a new county council person, so, okay, I just wanna make sure that I understood that correctly, that the plan,
Right, and
your suggestion is not to
It's easier to
lower.
deal with them as individuals than it is to deal with 3 or 7 council people, or, you know, we have a new commissioner. You know, this, you can't, because you gotta pay them all the same.
Correct.
So that's, you can't really do what I'm saying here. But I don't think, we cannot lower the pay. That's just, I mean, we have that ability, we can do that legally, but I just don't think it's right. But we
And because
raise it its way.
the first deputy's salary is tied to the department head's, the
Right,
elected
'cause of-
official's salary,
Technically, if we were to lower that salary,
and we would lower
then
the first
you would lower
deputy's.
hers, and I would, you know, argue that we have to do that because that's sticking with the guidelines that we've established. But that wouldn't be right either. So,
Be hard to do.
and we don't,
That would-
and there's
would be hard
so
to
many
do.
unknowns, because we don't know. Like, Jody's not automatically the first deputy come
right,
January 1st.
Yeah,
don't
we
even
don't, we
know.
don't know everyone's position
Right.
in the auditor's office moving forward.
or any office.
Right.
Or any office.
That's
I
true.
mean,
Or
they could
any
change-
office,
They could
anybody can
change
make a
everybody
change.
tomorrow, and, you know, that's their right to do that. But we need to know, what are we talking about when we say 2% for everybody, or 3%? I mean, it sounds reasonable, but
What's
maybe
that
it's
total?
not.
Yeah, what's
Maybe
that
it's
total?
not, yeah.
Plus the other asks that we've had so far
Mm-hmm.
in people's budgets. We definitely need to take all of that into consideration, so a lot there.
That insurance
Yeah,
piece is
and
an
that's-
important piece to know too.
What?
The insurance piece is important to know.
I think it is, because I don't want to penalize any of the employees by giving them, I don't want anybody to end up with less money. That's not right. And because you do want to keep the quality people that we've got. You don't want that changing.
But those are some real world experiences though too. Like sometimes I've had a pay increase and then lost money because my insurance went up. Like those are real.
It is, but if we can
We can avoid
prevent
it.
that,
I would like to.
we gotta try to prevent it anyway.
Yeah, I would,
Well,
we can.
we can only, I mean, unless you.
We're only good for 6 months.
Right, I was gonna say, unless you give us a percentage you want us to figure for the other 6 months, I mean, we don't have any idea what the insurance increase will be.
All we can do is base it on the information that we have today.
All right.
And, you know, a lot of people have saved money on their insurance because they did go through the wellness program. So that has been very beneficial.
So for the next meeting, are there certain percentages in the wage area that you want us to look at? Do you, I mean, do you want us to?
Well, what's been the latest on inflation?
Are there any other percentages or just that one?
Sorry, I didn't hear you.
Are there any other percentages or just 3%? Is that the only one you want to?
Council, I'd be myself 3%.
Okay.
That's,
All right, but you don't want any, so what they're asking is you don't want anything to compare it to?
Right.
Like, do you want us to do
2,
2,
3, 4?
3.5, 2.5, 4?
A lot of times that was what we do. Like, we give multiple.
I don't know that you need 6 comparisons, but you, maybe
Maybe a
1 or
couple.
2 anyway.
4, 5, 2, 3, 4,
2, 3, 4, that sounds good.
2, 3, 4. Okay.
That helps.
Okay.
Did anything, and circling back to where we started, did anything really change dramatically within the auditor's office
Was the postage.
postage?
That was the only thing that I mean, besides the overtime, but the postage is the only thing. Any of the contracts I have are still good for a few years at the same amount, so those didn't need to change.
Are you fully staffed?
Well, I hope Bill is back tomorrow.
Yeah.
And nobody's heard anything from him, I take
if I
it.
call him, I will call him and see what's going on or where he's at.
And I know Bob's not coming back at all, right?
Correct. Anything else?
Anything else anybody would like to see from us prior to the next meeting?
I'm gonna have to turn this blower off, because I'm having a hard time hearing it really.
Freezing over there, are you?
You just have to
You
turn
can't
it.
hear, I don't think.
On auto.
Yeah, just turn the temperature up and it'll shut off. Like the round one.
It's okay
Yeah,
now,
it'll
because we're done, but it's just enough noise that, there it goes.
Is there anything else that you'd like to see before the next meeting other than the 2, 3, and
3,
4%? Is there
yeah.
anything else?
I think we've pretty well covered that. I think we're good.
Are we tracking the 5-year plans? Was that asked from each department, and are
Yes.
they?
I'll
Okay.
put that together and I'll have that to you guys within the next week or so on
Okay.
that spreadsheet.
Yeah, not a big deal right away, but I'd like to see it
I think a lot of times
moving forward.
we make sure we get that at your meetings.
Yes. It's helpful to gauge, right?
Anybody else in the council have anything? Not, we will adjourn until tomorrow. Or we're in recess until tomorrow.
Recessing.
Take all of our